Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
I've never been one for small towns. The way they cling to secrets, like old houses hoarding shadows in their corners, always set my nerves on edge. But when my editor at the newspaper told me to take a break after the burnout from covering the city's crime beat, I didn't argue. I packed a bag, rented a cabin in the remote town of Gray Hollow, and drove north until the city's lights were just a memory in my rearview mirror. The plan was simple: 2 weeks of quiet, maybe write a novel, and get my head straight. That was before I heard the whisper in the fog. Gray Hollow was a speck on the map, nestled in a valley where the mountains seemed to lean in, as if guarding something. The town had one gas station, a diner that smelled of grease and regret, and a library that looked like it hadn't been touched since the 80s. My cabin was a mile out, surrounded by pines that creaked in the wind. The first night, I slept like the dead, lulled by the silence. But by the second night, I noticed the fog. It rolled in after sunset, thick and heavy, swallowing the trees until the world outside my window was a wall of gray. I didn't think much of it. Mountain towns get fog, right? But as I sat at the rickety desk, scribbling notes for a story I hadn't yet figured out, I heard it. A whisper. Faint, like a breath against glass, but unmistakable. It wasn't words, not exactly, just a low, rhythmic murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I froze, pen hovering over the page, my heart thudding. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe the pipes in the old cabin, but when I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, the fog seemed to pulse with that same rhythm, as if it were alive. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, the fog was gone, and the whisper was a memory I tried to dismiss. I drove into town to clear my head, stopping at the diner for coffee. The place was half empty, just a few locals hunched over their plates. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Marge, poured my coffee without a word. I tried to make small talk, asking about the weather, the town, anything to feel normal. "Fog's been thick this week," I said, stirring sugar into my cup. "Heard anything strange out there?" Marge's hand paused mid-pour, just for a second. "Strange?" she said, her voice flat. "Just fog. Comes and goes." I nodded, but her eyes didn't meet mine. She moved on to another table, and I felt the weight of the room shift. The locals were watching me, not staring but glancing, quick and furtive, like they were sizing me up. I paid and left, the bell above the door jangling too loudly in the quiet. Back at the cabin, I tried to write, but my mind kept circling back to the whisper. I told myself it was nothing, just my city nerves fraying in the silence. But that night, the fog came again, thicker than before. And so did the whisper. This time, it was clearer, almost forming words. I strained to listen, my breath shallow, but it slipped away like smoke. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, the beam cutting through the fog like a knife. The air was cold, damp, and heavy, with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic, like blood. "Hello?" I called, my voice swallowed by the mist. No answer, but the whisper seemed to grow louder, circling me. I spun around, the beam shaking in my hand, but there was nothing, just fog and shadows. I stumbled back inside, locked the door, and sat up until dawn, my notebook forgotten. The next day, I went to the library, desperate for answers. The librarian, an older man named Harold, with glasses perched on his nose, looked surprised to see me. "Not many visitors come here," he said, his voice creaky as the wooden floor. I asked about the town's history, anything about strange sounds or fog. He hesitated, then pulled a dusty book from a shelf. Gray Hollow Chronicles. Not much to tell, he said, but his fingers lingered on the cover, as if reluctant to let it go. I spent hours reading. The book was a dry account of the town's founding in the 1800s, its logging industry, and a few vague mentions of disappearances in the early 1900s. Nothing about whispers or fog, but one line stuck with me. The valley holds its own, and those who listen too closely may not return. Cryptic nonsense, I thought, but it lodged in my brain like a splinter. That night, the whisper returned, and this time it spoke my name. Emma, it hissed, low and deliberate from somewhere deep in the fog. I bolted upright in bed, my skin prickling. I didn't go outside. Instead, I shoved a chair under the door handle and clutched a kitchen knife, telling myself I was being paranoid. But the whisper didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like it was inside the cabin, inside my head. I don't know when I fell asleep, but when I woke, the fog was gone, and the knife was still in my hand. I couldn't stay in the cabin anymore. I needed answers. I drove back to town and cornered Marge at the diner. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant. The fog, the whispers, what aren't you telling me? Her face went pale, and she glanced at the other customers, who were suddenly very interested in their food. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "You don't know what you're stirring up." "Then tell me," I said, leaning closer. "I heard my name last night, in the fog." She froze, then grabbed my arm and pulled me into the kitchen, away from prying eyes. "You need to leave," she whispered. "Tonight. Pack your bags and go. Don't ask questions, just go." "Why?" I pressed, my heart racing. "What's out there?" She shook her head, her lips tight. "Some things are better left alone. You hear it, you're marked. That's all I'll say." Marked. The word hit me like a punch. I wanted to argue, to demand more, but the fear in her eyes stopped me. I left the diner and went back to the library. Harold was there, polishing his glasses. I asked him about the disappearances in the book, about the valley holding its own. His face tightened, and he said, "Some stories aren't meant to be told." But when I pressed, he sighed and pointed me to a box of old newspapers in the back. The articles were sparse, but chilling. Over the decades, people had vanished in Gray Hollow, always during heavy fog. No bodies, no traces, just gone. A few mentioned hearing voices before they disappeared. One article from 1923 quoted a man who claimed the fog spoke to him before his wife went missing. The locals called it a curse, a superstition, but no one had answers. I photocopied what I could and drove back to the cabin, my mind spinning. That night, I didn't wait for the fog. I packed my bag, ready to leave, but curiosity, or stupidity, kept me there. I wanted to know what was out there. I sat by the window, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other, and waited. The fog came, thicker than ever, and with it, the whisper. This time it was clear, a chorus of voices weaving together. "Emma, come to us. Emma, you belong." I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was tired of being afraid. Maybe I needed to know. I stepped outside, the fog swallowing me whole. The whisper guided me, pulling me deeper into the woods. My flashlight flickered, then died. But I kept walking, the voices growing louder, more urgent. The air was heavy, pressing against my skin, and that metallic smell was stronger now, sharp and sickening. I don't know how long I walked. Hours, maybe. The fog parted suddenly, and I stood in a clearing I'd never seen before. In the center was a circle of stones, ancient and weathered, arranged like an altar. The whispers stopped, and the silence was worse. I approached the stones, my heart pounding, and saw something carved into them. Symbols I didn't recognize, spiraling inward like a maze. And in the center of the circle, a dark stain on the ground, like old blood. I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, knife raised, but no one was there. The fog was closing in again, and the whispers returned, louder, angrier. "You see now," they said. "You know." I ran. Branches tore at my clothes, my breath ragged, but I didn't stop until I reached the cabin. I locked the door, barricaded it with furniture, and sat there, shaking, until dawn. The fog lifted, and the whispers faded, but I knew I couldn't stay. I threw my bag in the car and drove, not stopping until I was miles away, the mountains a blur in the distance. Back in the city, I tried to forget. I told myself it was a hallucination, stress from the job, anything but the truth. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. At night, I'd wake up, certain I heard my name in the hum of the air conditioner. I stopped going out after dark. I stopped writing. A month later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, just a plain brown envelope. Inside was a single photograph, grainy and old, of the stone circle in the clearing. And standing in front of it, smiling at the camera, was me. I don't remember taking that photo. I don't remember anyone else being there. I burned it. But sometimes, when the city fog rolls in, I hear the whisper again. And I wonder if I ever really left Gray Hollow.